We've heard the requests, and we're coming at you with a 12-team mock draft. How's it going?
I'm doing good, my friend.
We have a goal of 500 subscribers by August 1st. So if you are new here, please drop us a like and subscribe. With that, let's get the draft started here. So Matt, you're going to take from the 6th spot in the middle, and I'm going to go from 12, show you guys a turn pick.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, I was kind of hoping that one of the top 3 quarterbacks would make it back to me, but that's kind of a fool's errand in 12-team Superflex. So I'm going to go with who I have is my number 3 wide receiver, because this still is a 3 wide receiver format, and take CeeDee Lamb here.
Yeah, that's interesting because that feels early in 12-team. I definitely am hoping to get a quarterback down here. Oh, man, I didn't get the hard part about 12, right, is if you wait, you're looking at not a very good quarterback in the 3-4 turn here. So, like, I could obviously go Gibbs and Neighbors and just lock in excellent players at my other 2 spots, but without a quarterback, it just gets really hard to compete and keep up. So I am going to go with my number 4 wide receiver, who is Puka Nacua. And then I'm going to go down and I'm going to grab Patrick Mahomes with that turn pick.
Yeah, and I will say too, the caveat to me, picking Lamb there is I do have Caleb Williams and Drake May a little bit or even quite a bit above consensus. So I'm in the camp that even if we do see a decent run on quarterbacks, that one of those guys will be available. Now, fortunately enough, I still have Baker Mayfield on the board, who is my number 7 QB. Take a look at the running back position. We still have CMC, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, wide receiver. Oh, Nico Collins, that's tempting. Oh, man. Okay. You know what? I'm going to do something a little bit different here. Typically in 12-team, I would push up quarterback here quite a bit, but I'm still holding on hope that one of the guys in the early teens will make it back to me. So let's go ahead and lock in Nico Collins, because while I do love Drake London and Ladd McConkey, I definitely see a tier break between the Collins group and those guys. This can get risky really fast. So just if you're thinking about doing this, just mock draft a ton, because you don't want to be caught with your tail between your legs if you do see a big run at the quarterback position. So I got pretty lucky here. I talked about taking Baker in the 2nd round, which I still think would have been a solid pick. Now he somehow makes it back to me in the 3rd round. I'm not sure if you can totally bank on this, but, as great as Baker's been the last 2 years, he gets an additional weapon in Emeka Egbuka. We do see the departure of Liam Cohen. We had similar concerns last year with the departure of Dave Canales, and I think we're just seeing, again, that, Baker is good now, and he's living up to that number 1 pick. So I'm going to lock in Baker here, and so far I actually like this build quite a bit.
Yeah, I obviously love that as well, but I'm looking at this now and it's like 3 quarterbacks have gone in rounds 2 and 3. I personally think that Sleeper needs to clean up their algorithm a little bit, because the chances that happens in your home leagues is like so low. There's going to be at least a couple teams that go in on multiple quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds in your 12-team leagues, not your 10-team, right? We talk about going quarterback early and then waiting a long time, but this is like quite the value here for Baker in round 3, but also just on the board for quarterbacks in general. So for me, I don't have a running back yet, and I'm very happy about who fell to me. Chase Brown, I'll be covering him in my Rankings Risers video later this week. I really think that Chase Brown has a chance to kind of explode and continue what he did in the second half last year. And if he's going to be most of the game in town, I think he can absolutely do that. Now, he did get hurt last year, and I don't know that was as much of a workload thing as it was why is he in at the very end of a game you're already winning? But, so Kyrie, that happened to Kyron 2 years ago too, where it was like they're blowing him out and they're giving him his 25th carry of the game. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like, it's fine. Just give it to somebody else. So, I like Chase Brown quite a bit. I'm going to take him as my kind of hero running back, right? In 12 teams, this is still early enough where you can take a hero and continue to wait on that 2nd running back spot. And then I'm going to take a look at quarterbacks here, because I do have Goff ranked the highest of this group, and then Dak. So because they're down here, I do love Justin Herbert, but I am going to wait a little bit on Herbert, and I'm going to lock in my next wide receiver, who I currently am going to go over this guy in the Rankings Riser video as well, Tyreek Hill. I have moved him up to wide receiver 12. I'm getting a
Ooh.
little bit of momentum behind him, and we did talk about the tier break after, London, McConkey, and Brown. So I'm going to be moving Tyreek into that spot. So I'm pretty happy to be getting him at this point in the draft.
Yeah, I have a feeling that number 12 wide receiver ranking is going to continue to be in flux for, most of the industry up until draft day. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what settles in. But I have seen Tyreek Hill rise quite a bit. And I've actually been taking him a little bit more in best ball because he kind of just fits that boom bust, player profile anyway. Now, I don't have a running back yet. So I'm going to take a look at those guys. We see Alvin Kamara and Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon. That's interesting to me because, I think Kamara and Walker are both in line for really good seasons. I do have Walker ranked a little bit higher, and this isn't necessarily a zero RB approach, but have should I pass on those guys, I would be a little bit hesitant. As much as I want to take like Caleb Williams here or Drake May, I just don't want to necessarily be shut out at the position. And we're going to be doing a bold prediction show, probably come August. But Kenneth Walker having a stellar season is definitely going to be one of those guys that I'm going to be having on there.
I like the Ken Walker pick. He's going to be featured in the Risers video as well. I only moved him up 2 spots, but I just felt like moving him into the tier above warranted a discussion there. So I like the Walker pick. The fact that Camaro almost made it back to you is wild. Like,
I know.
no running backs in all league.
Well, do you remember when we made the players I couldn't stop drafting in pre-draft best ball, like in March,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Camaro was consistently going around behind Kenneth Walker, and I think those were like round 5 and 6 picks, and it's like I just can't stop taking these guys. But now I'm seeing him more and more kind of in that similar round, which I think is appropriate. Now, swinging back to me, I'm going to take a look at the quarterback position, and for the sake of being realistic, we're starting to see the computer push these guys down a little bit more than I would necessarily think is going to happen. So Jared Goff is somebody who I've recently moved above Caleb Williams and Drake May. We've just seen him be so good the last few
There
seasons.
you
And
go. I
yeah,
like
I
that.
know. I know. And I think initially I kind of had, best ball brain a little bit
Yeah,
where Goff
of course.
seems a little bit boring, but the fact that it is super flex, having that stability is just it is just such a bonus. And sure, maybe the offense takes a step back a little bit, but in my opinion, it's just going to be if they're in more shootouts, he's going to have to be throwing more versus kind of the David Montgomery show at the end of the game. So let's lock in Goff here.
Yeah, I like that pick. Goff is who I obviously would have liked to have at my pick, but I'm guessing Dak is going to make it. So yeah, and that's that right there. I also will say too, like a little bit, watch the board, um, because that's why I decided not to go quarterback at the 3-4 turn. There is because so few went off that I knew that there was going to be a run in these next 2 rounds. You see here, right, that 7 quarterbacks went between my picks, but because there were so many that I was okay with, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get a quarterback in the 5-6 turn that I'm fine with, and I'm gonna try and get additional value, especially after taking Mahomes, where you're at a turn, you don't know what the rest of the board is gonna do. So I go Mahomes, reach a touch, and then I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball now a little bit. I didn't necessarily need to do that, right? Like, would I rather have
Mm-hmm.
Jameer Gibbs and Justin Herbert than Mahomes and Chase Brown? Like, yeah, probably, but you just didn't know that Herbert was going to be there for you, right? So now I was able to lock in Chase Brown at least, and still going to be able to get my quarterback at Dak. So watching the board from the turn picks is pretty important because it's just so long between your picks. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but looking back at what just happened to help you foreshadow what you'll be able to do later is even more important, when you're out there in the 12 spot, because it can feel like forever before you get to pick. So I'm very happy with Dak. And then the other player I'm going to go with here might surprise you, I guess, because I don't choose from these guys a lot, and so the opportunity to pick Chuba Hubbard never really presents itself to me. I do have him inside of my top 20, though. I have him ranked at 19, 2 spots ahead of Trevion Henderson. So I do like Trevion Henderson quite a bit too, but Chuba, I feel like, is going to hit the ground running, just as coming off a top 10 season. And so, I mean, I have him at 19, but he absolutely has a more upside than that. And I'm hopeful that Carolina is going to be better on offense even than they were last year. So, Rico Dowdle is there. I'm sure we'll spell him at least a little bit, but he's not somebody I'm super worried about this season. So I'm going to go with Chuba here.
Yeah, I don't think that you've drafted Chuba in any of them that we've done, and I was a little bit more in on him in the beginning. I'm kind of just, I don't know, I'm a little bit nervous when some of these guys that don't necessarily have these flashy careers back themselves into these big workloads, and then bring in Rico Dowdle, and then like I don't know with Trevor Etienne, like he's such a wild card because I would watch some games in college and I'd be like, damn, this guy's good. Like he's better than his brother. And then I'd watch some teams. I'm like, dude, Trevor Etienne is horrible, like horrible. Like I don't know how he's. I mean, he's not as inconsistent as Ollie Gordon, but like he was wildly inconsistent. So, but they did ride Chuba last year, and they've got a good offensive line, and they did extend him mid-season, so it shows that
Mm-hmm.
they really trust this guy. So, and
And he
it's not like
wasn't
I'm.
terrible. He wasn't terrible in 2023 either. If you see this year, he played 17 games and he was running back 27, and he wasn't even necessarily the featured back, right? But he still had 40 receptions and 240 carries. So, seeing him come back and do 250 carries and 40 receptions again on better efficiency and more scores, like sure, the scores might take a step back, but we don't really expect him to finish as running back 14 either, right? So if you're picking him as RB 19, he takes a
Mhm.
little bit of a step back. It feels like a very safe role that he's going to have in this offense.
Yeah, no, that I feel that. And then looking at the wide receiver position right here, there's a lot of guys that I'm not necessarily super in on. I kind of view this as kind of a big jumbled tier. In fact, I'd probably push Olave up quite a bit higher. So the fact that he's down in ADP, I might kind of play that game. And there's a couple running backs that I'm looking at here. Montgomery and Caleb Johnson. It's funny because the last mock draft we did, I took Caleb Johnson over Monty, and you're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. So I went back and I checked my rankings, and I do have Monty one spot above Caleb. And I think the fact that he's my RB2 and can provide that stability, I think I'm going to lock him in here because, when I was looking at Monty's stats year over year, it's like I'm not necessarily drafting this guy to be like top 15, but even, in his days in Chicago, on much lower touchdowns, he was still kind of in that low to mid 20s range. So I think he's still very safe. I'm going to get a lot of touchdown equity in this offense that, still projects to be top five between he and Jared Goff.
Yeah, and something that you shouldn't sleep on with David Montgomery, he obviously got hurt. He missed 3 games, still finished as running back 18, but he also had as many carries and targets as Jameer Gibbs when he got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Gibbs went absolutely bonkers after that, and Gibbs was on better efficiency, but the role here is really strong. And obviously, we'll see what happens with the offensive coordinator, but I don't want to deter people from thinking that David Montgomery isn't going to have this big role and be very productive. He will be. It's another guy. I have him ranked at 20, one spot behind Chuba.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you actually watch the Lions games. You're like, oh, Monty's actually getting like targets in the passing
Yeah.
game, and he's getting
Oh, yeah.
dump offs. It's not like just this, whatever kind of typecast we put him in. But swinging back around, I was lucky enough to get the other guy, Caleb Johnson, here. So I think as my third running back, and at this point in the flex spot, it's just somebody that, again, I've been very high on throughout the pre-draft process and in college. I think he goes into a great situation. I think we talked about this before, but we'll see in the beginning how much he gets on the field, and if he blows an assignment for Aaron Rodgers, maybe he gets put in the doghouse. But I think they drafted him for a reason, and even though it wasn't the capital we had hoped for, again they didn't have a second round pick, so he kind of fell into their laps in the third.
Yeah. And hopefully he doesn't get benched because Rodgers is whining. That would be so lame. It's like, dude, can you not do that? But okay, so looking forward to my pick now, and it's interesting to see how many receivers went off between your picks, right? So even though you're in the middle, you still missed the receivers there, which is wild. Uh,
Yeah.
but but you were able to lock in the running back, right? And that's another thing we kind of say play the board, right? Because you might have been wanting to go in a receiver. You didn't want to pass on Montgomery, though. You thought maybe those two would both go, and then Caleb, the other guy you're considering, falls all the way. Just take him and figure out the receiver after that. Normally in 10 teams, it's a little easier to have an idea of where you're going to go. But in 12 team, it just, again, even when you're in the middle, it just stretches you a little bit thinner than maybe you were expecting. And so just be prepared at all times to pivot and just take value when it presents itself. So looking down now at the receivers, because I still need a receiver, I need flex, I need a tight end. So there's still quite a bit of um, quite a bit of different directions I can go here. Chris Godwin is somebody early in the offseason I had been drafting and was in on, but I recently dropped him significantly in my rankings, and I almost want to drop him further because I'm not confident in that ankle at all. I feel like there was a lot of different injuries that happened, including breaking the fibula, which is just like, I don't know. I feel like we just saw Tony Pollard and Isaiah Pacheco have that injury and become like wholly ineffective, even when they came back. So I'm a little weary on Godwin. And I guess foreshadowing that makes me want to push Igbuka up. But I don't know. I just don't feel very super great about any of these wide receivers. I feel like I can get somebody later that I could maybe pair to try and cover that wide receiver 3 spot. And somebody I've been recently more in on, and looking at the rest of the running backs here, I'm definitely not excited about anybody down here. So I'm going to take DeAndre Swift. Um, I I think they didn't do anything to replace him, and Ben Johnson is
Yeah.
back, and he had some good games last year. And so if the offense is better overall, he might back his way into some really good production here. And so I'm not the hugest Swift fan. He cost me a title because I played him over Devontae Adams a couple years back, so I still am recovering from that scar. But I'm tentatively going to take him here. And then looking back at the tight end position, right? So it's funny because the way they have this ranked is not at all how I see the tight end position. I have David Njoku at 6, Evan Engram at 7, Tyler Warren at 8, and so Kraft at 9 and Jono at 10. So it's just like there's so many good tight ends here. I just can't justify doing it. So I'm going to go back to the wide receiver position and end up just going in on one of these guys. And just for the sake of being I'm going to take Calvin Ridley, right? So we saw Terry McLaurin kind of get pushed way down into this area last year. They got a rookie quarterback, and he jumped way up in production. Calvin Ridley led the league in air yards last year. So if Cam Ward is at all better at throwing the ball downfield and can kind of make the offense even middle of the pack, I think there's a chance that we could see Ridley turn into this year's Terry McLaurin. So I'm gonna draft him.
Yeah, I like that pick. I was kind of hoping he would make his way, back to me as well. And I think, Cam Ward might be the most under talked about or undervalued or however you want to call it, number one pick ever. So I think he has a chance to be a really nice player in that system. And, for me, this pick, there's a lot of wide receivers that, definitely intrigue me. But the fact that, I'm going to be having to start this player week 1, I just know I want somebody that at least offers, a mix of stability and upside, and pick my guy, Mr. Jacoby Myers. Are you
Nice. I
shocked?
recently
Are
moved
you?
him. No, no, not at all. I recently moved him way up as well. So I moved him
I
up to
saw that.
41. I totally whiffed on it. I don't know why I haven't ranked at 41. I just hadn't looked at my rankings in a month, and then I was like, whoa, that's way too low. So I moved him up to
Yeah.
29. I have Ridley like 2 spots above him at 27, I think. So
Mm.
Myers is definitely somebody though that I'm going to be heavily targeting this draft season.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay. So looking at, probably don't need a running back here. There's no one really that interests me. Tight end. Njoku's an interesting one because I do have him tight end 6 at the wide receiver position. Quite a bit of noise here. Not, I don't want to say noise, but uh, man, I kind of hate to go in on tight end here, but I just really think that Njoku is in for a really good season, assuming he stays healthy and Joe Flacco's the quarterback. And I think even if they move on from Flacco, I think that Njoku's a very easy, reliable target for one of the younger QBs.
Yeah, and he's pretty established now. I mean, I remember early in his career, it's like this guy has all the upside in the world. Never came to fruition, and then as soon as it does come to fruition, it's like, oh, now he's the kind of like the older, boring tight end now, and it's like, okay, well,
Right.
wait, why did we switch that up? Like what? He's still really good, and he's producing
Yeah.
now. Why are we backing off of him? So I love that pick, and it did make me hold my breath a little bit because I was going to go in on tight end here, and I'm going to take Evan Engram. So I'm going to lock in my tight end. At this point, I love being able to get a top 10 tight end in my rankings. Number 7, I think Peyton knows how to use his tight end, and Engram has as good of a chance as anybody on the team to become the number 2 target for Bo Nix. So, obviously it'll be Sutton, it'll be Engram, and then whoever steps up on the outside with RJ Harvey on the backfield is how I would guess that they set up their passing game. And so I'm excited to get Engram there. And then looking at the overall board, then see in 12 team, right? This algorithm here isn't going to be giving you the urgency on quarterback, unfortunately. Right? I mean, you got a couple teams that only have one here, and it's just never going to play out that way. So I wish they'd push the urgency on quarterback just a little bit. That might be worth a call. But uh, so like this is about the time though in your 12 team leagues that you should be looking to get a third quarterback. If you don't do it now, you're going to end up with somebody very, very late, right? So you're going to end up with Tyler Shuck, Russell Wilson, who might lose his job, or you could take a shot on Jackson Dart if you think he's going to kind of take over Daniel Jones, if you think he's going to be the starter. So my thought here is that I am as big of a fan as anybody of Tua. And when he's on the field, the chance that he's going to be a startable player are decently high, right? And so the fact that I'm getting him in around 10, the fact that I'm getting him after my 2 established starters, right? I got Mahomes and Dak. I'm going to go in on Tua here and feel good about having that reliable third option when he's out there on the field.
Yeah, that's going to be a pretty boom bust stack with he and Tyreek, but I like it, and I do see the vision. There is someone on the board who definitely excites me here, and Sleeper still has him pushed down, and that's Stephon Diggs. Assuming he is back and healthy, we saw the day after the boat party, he was cutting on the field and looking good. That he is Drake May's number one, and I can't really be high on Drake May without being high on Diggs and Kyle Williams as well. So I'm going to go with Diggs there, and then swinging back around, there are a couple interesting wide receivers, nothing too crazy. Running back position, nothing too wild, but I guess I'll follow suit at the wide receiver, or I'm sorry, at the quarterback position, and take my tried and true Mr. Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, and again, great value there. I don't know. Maybe people on Sleeper are going to draft off the board a little bit, or they feel the urgency to pick other
And that
positions. But again,
happens.
another
That
guy I
happens
just don't
too,
see
right?
being this low.
You know,
Yeah,
we'll get into drafts and people haven't looked at stuff until the day of or the day before, and they'll see these guys way down. And they're like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want to reach on Stafford 3 rounds according to Sleeper's ADP, so it's not necessarily unrealistic.
yeah. No, I mean, I definitely think if you can do something like this, that's where you should be grabbing your third quarterback. If you can get Stafford that late, I think it's absolutely worth it. So, and it's again, play the board because you had these 3 come off, and then I took Tua and just nothing at quarterback all the way, right? So I could have even maybe gone in a different direction here. I would have taken a Mecca Egbuka, right? I had kind of alluded to this earlier
Mm-hmm.
that I was worried about Godwin. So if I didn't think it was going to be quarterback central here, I would have taken Igbuka and then taken just whoever was left at quarterback. I would have been totally fine with Gino or Darnold here if that's who my third quarterback could have been. So again, drafting from the turn though, you just don't know how that's going to go, and the last thing you want is for 5 quarterbacks to go, and then it's like, oh man, it was like Booker really worth
Yeah.
that? Like he's on my bench, and like I don't know, he could be buried in the depth chart, like all that type of stuff, right? Versus now, even I'm going to draft Keon Coleman, somebody else I moved way up. So right, would you rather have Egbuka
Yes.
and somebody that's way down? I mean, I don't know. I think I'd rather have Tua and Coleman, and I'm going to be happy there. Let's peek at the running backs real quick because I do like to get at least 4. And so if there's somebody that stands out here as a 4th option, then I could possibly go in there. And uh, there is somebody that I do want to highlight and talk about, and that's Tank Bigsby. So Jacksonville, I feel like doesn't really have a clear running back one. And I feel like Travis Etienne, you see him here, is getting pushed up. And I know Liam Cohen has kind of talked him up, but I don't know, man. I mean, he was on the rumored to be on the trade block. He wasn't as good of a rusher as Tank Bigsby last year, and this is Bigsby going into year three now. Uh, there's obviously a scenario where Etienne just goes nuts, but I still have hope that Bigsby can be well more involved than getting 95 attempts. I mean, I just don't know that I understand this projection at all. He's not going to be very involved in the receiving game, especially with Tootin, likely to take some of that work. But on the ground, I expect Bigsby to blow these numbers away and be relatively valuable on the ground.
Yeah, a couple months ago in best ball, all three of those guys were going pretty much in the same round and pretty far down the board. So I was taking a ton of ETN, and recently ETN's been getting pushed up a ton, and then it's Tootin. So I've just been taking a lot of Bigsby late, kind of with that same hope. But it's been interesting to see that all kind of unfold. So looking at my board here at the running back position, a couple guys kind of interest me here who I know are going to have roles on their specific teams: J.K. Dobbins and Rashad White. So I think what I'll do is go with Dobbins, because I think, especially in the beginning of the year, and I really think throughout the season, assuming health, that he's going to have a role on this offense. And we know that, if he's going to be the first and second down running back, and I guess even on the field for pass protection too, as the rookie gets up to speed on what should be a good offense behind a good offensive line, I think there can be some late value similar to what we saw with him last year, but maybe not quite that initial ceiling. And then looking at the wide receiver position, someone who I've also been drafting quite a bit of, and I know it's kind of cheating because he's at the top of the board, but Rashid Shaheed, he was just on a tear last year. I mean, he was the guy really over Olave, and that was not expected in New Orleans. And we know that Carr likes to chuck it deep, and he's gone, and the OC's gone, and a lot is changing, but I think he's a very talented player that can have some pretty solid spike weeks.
Yeah, and the spike weeks come because he's definitely a downfield threat. Obviously, you mentioned Carr
Mm-hmm.
loves to chuck it deep, but like, look at these. Like, he scored long touchdowns in the first 2 weeks, then had 5 targets, but didn't have a single catch. This was the perfect buying opportunity, and then he just went nuts in the target category. And even here, like
Yeah,
even the 5, 4, and 5 was like close enough to Olave, where Olave I think had 1 target more than him maybe in these 3 games. But it was like, oh wait a second, this is much more of a 1A 1B type of situation than we anticipated going into the year. So we
mm-hmm.
kind of say don't draft people or players coming off of knee injuries, but I think he's a little bit different in the fact that it was a meniscus. So, he was fully healthy probably by the end of the season. And, he shouldn't have any limitations throughout his entire offseason program, right? His own workouts leading up to OTAs and then going through OTAs, and he's going to be a full go in training camp. So, the explosive nature of him coming back to NFL speed from a meniscus is so much different than an ACL, LCL, or than even the tibia fracture, or the fibula fracture that we were talking about before. So I have a lot more confidence in his health and on taking that shot there. All right, so going on to my picks now. I talked a lot about your picks, so let's make these quick. I'm gonna go with Eckler. I just think kind of at this
Yeah,
point, tried and true, and that's my fifth running back. So I'm not gonna go back to running back at all. Let's check in on the receivers. There's not a lot to get excited about down here, unfortunately. Right? There's some names. It's just like at this point, like, are we even ranking these guys down here, type of thing, So
yeah,
somebody that I do think is worth taking a shot on, right? A couple of guys up here, I think are all solid, but Cedric Tillman is somebody that flashed last year. Obviously, everybody remembers that three game stretch. If it is Flacco, I think
yeah.
he can be serviceable, right? And that it's worth taking at least a late flyer on. I wouldn't have hated taking Hollywood Brown either. I think Rashi Rice's impending suspension is going to make him usable early in the year. And we've seen him in the past be able to draw a lot of targets. So, if he's kind of back to full speed, he was obviously getting back up to full speed towards the end of last year. But if he's back to full speed, I could see a situation where he's getting 8, 9 targets early in the year, and everybody is going to be like, dude, he's a starter in 3 wide receiver leagues until Rice is back, and he's not being drafted that way here.
Yeah, and thank you for teeing up my pick because it was going to be Hollywood there for those exact same reasons.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, we both like Hollywood. I mean, as a player, obviously the Chiefs'
Yeah,
offense has just been so weird the last couple of years, and I am definitely hoping they get back to being a more high flying offense. Right? I mean, with Worthy kind of taking the downfield role and running with it, and then also showing the ability to have a lot of targets. Right? That's not going to be his. It was more of a necessity than what his role is actually going to be. I think this offense could open up in a way this year that we haven't seen in 3 or 4 years.
yeah. And while I would probably, if this was our real draft, take Adam Thielen here because we've seen him be a target monster and have really good rapport with, Bryce Young, I do want to call out a player that I've kind of intrigued about this year. And, he should be the number three option on the offense, but he's just someone who I just really, really liked as a prospect and, has a very valuable slot role on the Texans offense. We saw Diggs thrive in that role last year in the beginning of the season and get a bunch of targets, and that's Jalen Noel.
Yeah, look at that. They didn't even get his picture in there yet. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring up Noel because in dynasty circles, right? He's going so late, but like if you're ready to compete, I almost like him better than Higgins this year. I know Higgins has been flashing and showing out really well uh, in camp or in OTAs and stuff so far, but like you mentioned about the role, if it's in the slot, it's easier throws, it's easier pitch and catch, and him and CJ Stroud developed that rapport early. I love the pick. I think he's easily a player that could become an early waiver wire priority in week 1, 2, or 3. All right, so looking down to me, since you mentioned Thielen, I'm going to pass on him for the purposes of this, and I'm going to go down to somebody I want to talk about. Where is he? Because he's been getting irrational hype, and this is Devon Vele. So uh, I mentioned Engram, right, and that they're going to have a second wide receiver to kind of complement Engram and Sutton. And what I wanted to highlight with Vele is I kind of think he's going to get that role to start the year. And he was decent last year when he got playing time. So you look at his player card here, and he really didn't get the opportunity to get on the field much early, despite the early hype with 8 targets. Then didn't really play, but then as the season rolled on, he got more and more opportunities, and you kind of see whenever it was a little bit more on the field, over 50%, he was actually doing some interesting things. Right, almost 10 a catch with a touchdown here, 6 for 80 in there. Right, a game where he had 15 a catch. And then later in the year, right, back down to 50, didn't really do much. So if he is going to be the featured guy opposite of Sutton, and he's going to be in that 65-70% of the snaps range, I think he could do some interesting things. I know he's older, but this is only his second year in the league. And so Devon Vele, just a name to keep in mind. All right, Matt, what do you think of your team? What do you got? What do you got for us? It looks pretty good to me.
Yeah, I think I would give it a B plus. I think at the quarterback position, getting two guys inside my top 11 is good with the added stability of Stafford late. I will say I don't love not necessarily having at least one running back, or I'm sorry, not having at least one running quarterback on my team, but overall, like those picks at the wide receiver position, having Lamb and Nico, two guys that could challenge for the number one wide receiver position in fantasy is a great addition. And then I feel like I filled out my depth nicely. And then at the running back position, like I said, I'm very high on Walker this year, Monty's stability, and Caleb Johnson, someone I'm very interested in, as well as I just think J.K. Dobbins is going too late. And then to get my tight end 6 in David Njoku, I feel like he's just plug and play every week. So overall, I like this team a decent amount.
Yeah, and I just to offer my thoughts here too. I feel like your make or break guy is Caleb Johnson here. You already have
Mm-hmm.
Myers
Yeah.
as your 3, and you went in on Njoku in round 9, where like if you had locked in maybe another receiver that you liked there, another possible flex option. Because then you go down to Diggs. I know you like Diggs quite a bit more than me. You get Stafford, and then it's like so. You're if Caleb doesn't work out, you're looking at like Diggs, Dobbin, or Shaheed as your flex guy, maybe even Brown early in the year. But I think if he doesn't get off to a quick start, you're going to be scrambling at flex just a little bit. But obviously, I like the way the rest of the team came together because you have two top 10 quarterbacks in my rankings as well. And Walker's somebody that I also am improving my opinion on as we get closer to the season. Jumping over to my team then. So I kind of went a little bit of everything at the beginning, right? I got one of each position through my first three. I got Puka, Mahomes, and Chase Brown. As it turned out, I think I extended a little bit too much on Mahomes. I could have just got Gibbs and let the quarterbacks kind of fall to me here. Now, again, I'm going to stress in some leagues, I wouldn't have even been able to have got Mahomes at 12. So, I think the urgency at quarterback, I did want to stress that, like, even if you feel like you extend there, it's worth doing in 12 team leagues. So, and then Tyreek Hill and Ridley to fill in my receivers, they're both kind of older. So I don't know that I love that a ton. I do like trying to get at least a little bit of youth there. And then, the backups are not even backups, but the guys that are, right on my bench behind them are Keon Coleman, Cedric Tillman, and Devon Vele. That is very thin in terms of what I think they could possibly be. So I think if I was going to do this again, I would probably forego the Engram and Tua picks, and I would try to get two more wide receivers at that point in the draft, and then handle my my QB3 and my wide receiver later. And that's specifically in three wide receiver leagues. And then at running back, I feel like I did extremely well. I got Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard, both in my top. I got a top 10 and I got a top 20 running back, and Swift is right there on the cusp of being top 20. I have him at 22. So I really think the way that this team rounded into form was good. I do like Ingram too, but again, like I said, I'm way thinner at wide receiver than I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, and with picking Mahomes that early, we're going to put out a video of kind of just draft tips here in the upcoming weeks. And one of the things that we stress and really can't stress enough is just look at the past results of previous drafts in your league and understand where quarterbacks typically go in Superflex. Because over the years, our draft has gone from, waiting on QBs a ton, but you're still able to kind of average it out and see the trends. And especially if you're at the turn where you kind of felt the need to pick Mahomes, but even though you have Baker, maybe one or two spots below him, he was available to me in the third round. So I think that would kind of be the biggest question mark. But again, like, when you're in these super flex best ball drafts, if you miss out early, you're looking at Tyler Shuck and Russell Wilson in like, so it can get a little bit crazy. And I think with Mahomes, like, he does provide a ton of stability too. So as you kind of fill out some of the other pieces, if need be, at wide receiver, because there's going to be plays on the waiver wire, there's going to be trades, things like that too. So I think you've got good anchors with he, Dak, and then the matchups with Tua. But there is some risk from age and previous injury concerns with some of these guys.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully, you enjoyed the 12 team content. Leave a comment down below if you want to see anything else specifically, and we'll see you in the next one.
Later.